You don't pour 20 years into building a company only to be discarded for someone's niece. But that's exactly what happened to me. My name is Noah Jensen. For over 2 decades, I was head of digital architecture at Carrington Solutions, based in downtown Toronto. I joined back when we were still using tape backups and on-prem firewall appliances. I oversaw the evolution from legacy systems to a quantum encrypted cloud framework. I designed the company's internal biometric access infrastructure from the ground up, a system that was later licensed to 2 Fortune 500 firms. I wasn't just another employee, I was part of the bedrock. Then along came Harper Quinn, 24, fresh out of a marketing diploma program in Montreal. Her resume read more like a LinkedIn influencer's feed than a technical record, 3 failed startup ventures, a podcast on disruptive storytelling, and a surname that just so happened to match that of our CEO, Gregory Quinn. She called me sir the first time we met, all wide-eyed confidence and performative deference. That's when I knew the decision had already been made. I just hadn't been told yet. Gregory didn't have the decency to look me in the eye. He sent HR. We're restructuring. They said, your role has become redundant. As if the architecture that held together their entire infrastructure had suddenly become optional. They gave me a plaque glass, cold, cheap. It read, with gratitude, 2003 to 2023. My last name was spelled wrong. No team lunch. No farewell speech. Just a few awkward nods and the slow walk to the elevator. Except for one moment. Jacob, my intern from 3 summers ago now, a junior developer, caught me by the door. He shook my hand like an equal and said quietly, they'll regret this. I stepped out of the building with the plaque in one hand and a backup USB drive in the other. The spring air felt colder than I expected. Not a gust, not a storm, just an absence. The kind of cold that doesn't bite, just lingers. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I went home, placed the plaque in a drawer, and booted up my laptop. I opened a folder named Systems Legacy, Jensen, and scrolled through diagrams I had drawn by hand years ago. I saw my own fingerprints across every authentication node, every fail-safe loop, every system override protocol. My voice, quite literally, was part of the architecture. And in the final year, when I saw the writing on the wall, I added one more layer, a hidden one, not out of malice, but out of protection. Protection for the system, protection for the company, protection from exactly what had just happened. They didn't know it yet, but Carrington hadn't just lost an employee. They'd cut out the one person who understood how the system truly worked. Gregory thought replacing me would make his life easier. Within a week, the system began to resist Harper. It started small, an authorization delay, a login timeout, a flagged admin credential. Harper assumed it was just a legacy glitch. She even posted something smug on LinkedIn. Inherited a system full of surprises. Time to declutter the past. Legacy code nightmare. That post got over 500 likes, none from engineers. But what she didn't know, and what Gregory clearly never asked, was that I had designed the final security layer to require contextual handover. It wasn't just dual authentication. It wasn't just facial scan or tokenized access. It was continuity. The system didn't care about your title. It cared whether you understood what you were walking into. The voice print module she failed to trigger, buried under 4 layers of permissions. The fallback AI protocol she accidentally tripped. It recorded everything, every failed override, every unauthorized redirect, and then came the call. Hi, Noah. Dana from People and Culture. I hope you're well. Harper had a few questions about the system you designed. Would you be open to a quick consult? I said no. The second time, Dana tried again. More urgency. I said no again. The third time, it was Gregory. Noah. He began, trying to sound collegial, as if we were still on first-name terms. We're having a little trouble with the transition protocols. Some unexpected issues. It would really help to get your insight. Just a quick touch point. He didn't apologize. He didn't even acknowledge what he'd done. I told him I was consulting now, true enough. After all, the day after I left Carrington, I received an email from Marcus Lang, CTO at Constellar Aerotech. He'd heard I was no longer with Carrington. Are you open to consulting? That was it. 5 words. That quick touch point Gregory wanted. That ship had sailed. While he fumbled with my documentation or what little of it I'd shared, Constellar brought me in for a whiteboard session. Within a week, I was rebuilding their secure handoff protocol for sensitive aerospace projects. Real stakes, real people, no politics. Back at Carrington, things were unraveling. I heard from Nadine, the former compliance lead who'd taken early retirement. She'd seen Harper present at a Toronto tech mixer and quote me badly. She called your protocol paranoid level lockdown, Nadine said, sipping coffee over Zoom. Told the audience that old school engineers need to get out of the way of innovation. That was the line. It wasn't enough that they erased me. They were mocking the system I built, the system that kept their entire infrastructure intact. That night, I opened the backup USB drive. Inside was everything they'd ignored. Flagged logs, unsent warnings, internal memos I had drafted but never submitted. I named the folder Continuity Proof, not revenge, just insurance. And Carrington was about to need it more than they realized. A week later, both our names appeared on the panel list for a cybersecurity ethics symposium in Vancouver. Topic: Secure transitions in high-sensitivity systems. I nearly laughed. I hadn't planned to attend, but when I saw that Harper was not only speaking, but speaking on my area of expertise, I booked a flight that night. The event was held at a sleek downtown conference center, polished wood panels, low lighting, tech banners hanging like quiet declarations of war. I arrived early, took a seat 2 rows from the front, and waited. When Harper entered, she scanned the room and froze the moment our eyes met. She tried to smile. I didn't return it. The panel began with David Leclerc from Public Sector Cybersecurity, who gave a standard talk on procurement transparency. I barely heard a word. My eyes stayed on Harper, watching the way she shuffled her notes, checked her watch, crossed and uncrossed her legs. She was rattled. Then it was her turn. She opened with a hollow joke about breaking through old firewalls. Literally, a few scattered laughs. She spoke about modernizing infrastructure, removing outdated dependencies, and unlocking innovation through fresh leadership. She mentioned cleaning up a chaotic architecture left by previous hands. No names, but she didn't need to. I let her finish. Then I stood up. My name is Noah Jensen, I said calmly, walking to the podium. For 17 years, I led security architecture for a firm that believed cybersecurity was a luxury until it wasn't. A few heads turned. Others leaned forward. I want to share a case study, real, anonymized, and painfully relevant. Imagine a company transitions leadership. The departing architect offers full documentation, support, and continuity checks. Leadership declines. They appoint someone without technical fluency. That person disregards layered protocols. And when the system resists, they call it sabotage. I paused. The silence hung heavy. I didn't sabotage anything. I said, I built protection, the kind that activates only when someone unqualified tries to override it. I walked the audience through the dual authentication handover logic, the containment layers, the silent alert flags. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't point fingers. I didn't have to. By the time I stepped down, the room was completely still. After the session, I received more than a dozen handshakes and questions. David Leclerc came up to me and said, "That wasn't a case study, was it?" I just nodded. Later that evening, my inbox pinged. Gregory, subject, urgent. Need to speak now. Noah, we've had a serious breach. Harper can't regain control of admin privileges. Permissions are locked. The board is involved. Please call me. There was no apology, just fear. And fear, I've learned, is the first step toward honesty. I didn't call Gregory back. I forwarded his email to a folder titled Accountability Pending. Then I went for a walk. The streets of Vancouver were still damp from the morning rain, and the air smelled like sea salt and pine. As I walked past the harbor, I thought about the years I'd spent building a system designed to outlast egos, and how quickly it had been handed to someone who treated cybersecurity like a vibe. That night, I called Penelope. She had been Carrington's head of legal before she took early retirement last fall. We hadn't spoken in months. "They're blaming you," she said, not even waiting for me to say hello. "Blaming me? They're saying your code was built to collapse under new leadership. That Harper didn't fail, the system rejected her." I stopped walking. "Are they calling it sabotage?" Not outright, but the phrasing in the internal memos is getting dangerously close. You need to get ahead of this. I hung up and opened my old backup vault. Inside was everything emails, flagged alerts, formal warnings to Gregory about transition risks, logs showing Harper's repeated access failures, her override attempts, and the system's automated containment response. It wasn't just evidence, it was a timeline. I stayed up all night compiling it into a clean, professional report. No anger, no snark, just facts. I titled it System Integrity versus Leadership Negligence, a post-departure analysis. Then I sent it directly to the Carrington board, and I CC'd Penelope. The next 48 hours passed in silence, not even a bounce back. I didn't expect one. Corporate boards don't respond with emojis. But on the morning of the third day, Penelope called again. They've seen it. The board is convening a private review session less than 12 hours later. The internal shakeup began. Gregory was quietly removed from overseeing all technical operations effective immediately. Harper was placed on a performance improvement plan, which anyone who's worked in corporate Canada knows is just a polite countdown to termination. I wasn't celebrating. If anything, I felt a strange emptiness. I hadn't torched anything. I hadn't leaked a thing. I'd simply turned on the lights. What surprised me wasn't the board's reaction. It was the next call I received. Arthur Menon, Gregory's right hand, stone-faced, efficient. He never called unless something was already in motion. I read your report, he said. You didn't hold back. I didn't lie. No, he admitted. That's why I'm calling. He explained that the board was considering a full leadership restructure, that Carrington needed stability, and that the stakeholders were losing faith. And you think I'd come back? I asked. I think, he said, you should consider what justice really looks like. Those words stayed with me long after the call ended. Arthur's words echoed long after the line went dead. What does justice really look like? I wasn't sure anymore. In my younger years, I might have equated justice with retribution, seeing Harper escorted out, watching Gregory issue a public apology. But now, I was tired. I had a new consulting team that respected me. I had work that challenged me. I had peace, but I also had unfinished business. I gave it 48 hours. Then I wrote back. If the board is serious about rebuilding Carrington with integrity, I said, I'll talk, but only under one condition. Harper must be held publicly accountable, not for revenge for precedent. Arthur replied within the hour. Understood. The following Monday, Carrington released an internal bulletin. It was brief, formal, and impossible to misinterpret. Harper Quinn was terminated for gross negligence, citing failure to adhere to system transition protocols despite documented warnings. They didn't mention my name, but they didn't need to. The protocol she failed to follow had been mine. I received the notice from 3 different former colleagues, each attaching it with different emojis. One sent the popcorn icon, one sent a single fire emoji. The third just wrote, finally, but I didn't feel triumphant. No fist pump, no smirk, just quiet. The kind of quiet you get after an earthquake when everything has shifted and you're just waiting to see what's still standing. A few days later, I was walking past Carrington Tower on my way to lunch with Penelope. I stopped at the crosswalk, looked up at the building. The lights on the executive floor were on. Through the tinted glass, I could see a silhouette pacing back and forth. It was Arthur. He didn't see me. I didn't wave. I wasn't going back, not to my old office, not to my old desk. I wasn't interested in reclaiming territory. I was interested in something else entirely, building a future where this didn't happen again. I opened my inbox that evening and saw a message from Gregory, not an email, a scanned, handwritten letter. No subject line. It read, Noah, you were right about Harper, about the system, about me. I should have protected what we built. I hope someday you'll accept that I was wrong. Gee, there was no return address, no explanation, just black ink on white paper. But I knew. I folded the letter, placed it in a manila envelope, and labeled it Carrington Final. Then I put it away. That night, over oysters and bourbon, Penelope raised a glass to not just surviving, she said, but rewriting the ending. I smiled, lifted my glass, and answered. I didn't rewrite it. I just took the pen back. Snow fell softly outside the restaurant window as Penelope and I clinked glasses. The city moved on, as it always did, oblivious to the quiet resolutions happening around dinner tables and in archived email threads. My world had shifted, but it hadn't collapsed. I'd taken back the narrative, not with lawsuits or dramatic press releases, but with truth, timing, and a refusal to disappear. Carrington didn't burn down. It adapted, forced to acknowledge its blind spots. Harper was no longer in any leadership role. Gregory had been moved into a vague strategic advisory position with no real authority. And my post-departure report, it now lived on the company's internal wiki under the heading Post-Incident Framework for Technical Continuity. Sanitized, but intact. It wasn't justice with fireworks. It was justice with documentation. I had no interest in watching them fall apart. I only cared that no one like me, someone who gave decades of their life to a mission, would be erased again without consequence. 1 week later, I got a message from a young cybersecurity analyst named Ria. She'd read about my case through back channels and wanted advice. She'd just been pushed out of her firm after raising red flags about insecure protocols. I replied, not with a speech, just with time, because that's what matters most, helping the next person keep their voice. This story isn't rare. Every day, somewhere across a conference table, or hidden behind a passive-aggressive HR memo, someone is being told they're redundant, that their systems are outdated, that their years of service don't align with future direction. But the truth, experience is not disposable. Integrity is not a phase, and leadership without accountability will always crumble eventually. So if you're watching this office stories journey and you felt what I felt, silenced, sidelined, replaced, know this, you are not alone. You are not powerless. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's a quiet file sent at the right time, a line of code they didn't know you had, a backup that tells the real story. Thank you for being part of this journey. Leave a comment. If Noah's story resonated, we read every one. Drop a 1 if you want to hear more real stories like this. And if you've lived through something similar, share it below. Your voice might be the next story we tell. We don't heal alone, and we don't stay erased. Not anymore.